Well, thank you very much. I'd like to first of all extend my appreciation to the Africa Center for giving me this chance to share my experiences with you. I'm not going to say much. I'm going to build on what has been said already by Colonel Kande and by Agnes. I work for a think tank in South Sudan called Center for Strategic Analysis and Research, and another think tank called International Growth Center based at LSE and Oxford. And I'm currently finishing my PhD in politics from the University of Cambridge. What I'm going to talk to you about is my experiences when I was working in the government, particularly in the Office of the President, around the time when South Sudan was making transition from being a sub-regional autonomous region to then becoming an independent state. Basically, during the interim period from 2005 to 2011, we had this structure which was quite an anomaly, really. You had a Sudan where South Sudan was represented in the Sudan, but then you have the government of Southern Sudan. And there were limitations on the kind of institution that the South Sudan could establish. For example, the intelligence agencies were supposed to be centralized. So we had the National Intelligence and Security Services that was based in Khartoum, in which a number of South Sudanese were part of, especially the one that came from the SPLA, particularly from the military intelligence. And then we had, because we were a sub-regional and a large territory, we had to establish some sort of security agencies. Initially started as for protection of the president, but it also quickly got really big to the extent that it was overseeing a number of different activities within the government. So when we were now in January, when we voted to become independent state, we had 6 months for which to prepare now and try to establish institutions that could then form the bedrocks of a sovereign state. And one of these was to establish the intelligence agencies and try to rethink our entire approach to the security institutions in South Sudan. But this was also a very interesting time, because this is when some of the dynamics that we are seeing now tearing South Sudan apart were coming to fore. This is where the competition within the ruling SPLM was becoming an issue, with a number of different factions trying to exert themselves. And while we are making this enormous transition, we are thinking now about establishing a state. This politics was happening in the background, and it was encroaching into everything, including how we're going to establish these security agencies. So as we approach July, our independence, President issued a decree in May where basically he removed the top leadership of the intelligence agencies and pushed them to the military. And this left a very junior official that he then promoted and then appointed them to be the head of the 2 branches of the intelligence agencies. Now, the Constitution say that the head of these agencies have to be appointed by the president, but only at a recommendation by the Minister of National Security. So before the Minister of National Security is even appointed, the president appointed these guys. Now in July, the Minister of National Security is then appointed, and automatically there was a power competition between the head of these agencies that has been appointed and the minister, who also was the former chief of staff and was the head of military intelligence for the most of the duration of the civil war. And it was also one of the political leaders that was already having this problem with the president, with the competition that was going on in the SPLM. So at that time, I was working in the World Bank, and I got asked to come from the World Bank to come and help establish the security architecture and work with the minister. And one of our first job was to basically define the white paper and try to think about the doctrine of these intelligence agencies and what they were going to do. And immediately, it was very difficult to move things forward. So my experiences was the limitations of technical role, particularly in an environment where politics is put above the technical design of institutions. The same thing carried forward just only a few months later when the Minister of National Security now tried to do a national security policy and strategy of South Sudan, which was supposed to then imagine the entire security architecture and define the mandates of different security organs, which were already competing for space. And then you also have these problems of trying to make constitution a reality, because the constitution defines specific mandates, but some of these organs have been operating in vacuum without any legal legislation for the last 6 years. And we're doing things that they were not allowed to do. And the problem now was, how do you get them back to do things that were actually sanctioned by the Constitution? And immediately it became problematic, and it became politicized. So we had this very comprehensive and consultative security policy and strategy making process, in which we had members from all the different departments of the government, including the intelligence agencies, the armed forces, and the police, and where we consult with all the different states. We have a lead person in every single state in South Sudan. And it took nearly a year, more than a year, to do the consultations with something like over 5,000 people. And we developed a document which I believe is one of the best documents that ever been developed in this sector. And the process that we use, in my opinion, is probably one of the best practices of how to approach this on the continent. But in the end, by the time now when we finish the consultations, the political breakdown within the party has reached an extent that it was very difficult now to bring this process to conclusion, because already the president has become too dependent on these security agencies that did not have oversight and did not have roles that were defined. So you have a situation where everybody could arrest anybody. So the police were arresting people, the intelligence were arresting people, the military was arresting people, the wildlife were arresting the people, including even the prisons. And it's very complex. And then within a very short time also, you have a breakdown on the military side, where some of the generals began now to recruit people from their ethnic backgrounds without the knowledge of the chief of defense forces, and trained them. And by the time now the civil war broke out, you had these militias moving in very quickly. And in the end, we had security institution of the state being severely undermined. So my experience here is sometime in the technical role, you can do the best that you could to try to produce what you can as a technocrat. But the problem is, if you have a political leadership that does not have that vision of trying to imagine what is all of this for and what is the purpose for building all of these organs, then all of that may not come to the outcome that you imagined initially. Now, as to what is opportunities for developing rising security sector leaders in South Sudan, I would say at the current state is very limited. In fact, if you're a rising young leader in security sector that try to approach these things from a professional perspective, trying to push the military and the intelligence agencies and the police to become more professional and accountable, then you would immediately be in a problem, because the institution have become the opposite of that. The institution now have become very unprofessional. You have people that can barely lead, that do not understand their roles as security official of the sovereign state. So to even have a chance of reversing this trend, it would require fixing the political crisis that South Sudan is in, and which is very complex and very difficult to fix, since the political leaders that are directly responsible and have the ability to solve this have abdicated their responsibility for doing so. As the example of African leaders, I would say the general that we had yesterday, General Anyedoho, in my opinion, is one of the great example of military leaders, because his story, what he did in the case of Rwanda, show a sense of purpose and a moral courage to try to do what is right in a face of extreme difficulties. And I think that is something very, very, very important, because it shows that he has a deep understanding of how the actions of today matter for tomorrow. So you can do something today, but what you do today lives beyond the moments in which you are doing it. Other leaders that I find to be great examples of African leaders include people like Desmond Tutu and Julius Nyerere. And Nyerere particularly, understanding the challenges of forging a state, because the security sector does not exist in vacuum. It's part of a larger structures of state, of forging a state that is inclusive and that accommodates all the diverse aspects of the society. So security sector and all the other sectors, they work in tandem toward building something that is beyond any individual or ethnic group or a particular leader. They try to forge a state. So I will stop there and hope to have a more discussion during the question and answers. Thank you.